This channel is supported by TrueFire. TrueFire is an online library
enough. You can get the TrueFire All Access Pass for as cheap as they ever do it, the $99 thing. So just jump and do that if you're looking for...
Okay, so I was sat having a chat with someone who's a guitar teacher the other day, and he kind of asked me a question, and it was like around, you know, do you feel comfortable playing in some keys? Do you feel more comfortable? What are your favourite keys to play in? And I kind of thought this was maybe an interesting sort of thing to talk about. And what has ended up happening for me is that essentially, like, the more obvious guitar-y keys, like maybe G major, A major, E major, you know, the stuff around the sort of caged stuff, to me, I gravitate, I think, fairly often away from those and towards these kind of non-guitar friendly keys, whether those be like G flat or F sharp major, or A flat major, to some extent B flat major, D flat major. And I found myself sort of in this place where I actually really like the sound of those keys and what it's like to play on those. So I wanted to talk about how I got to that position, as well as a few other really key, I think, things that were good advice for me as a player that have helped me along my journey as a guitarist. Now, the backing track, which is going to go across 2 keys, I'll put up on Patreon for you guys, and I'm also going to put together like a little bit of a worksheet. Hopefully there'll be some like bits and pieces here that might be useful, so Patreon, you can join that for £2 or £3 a month. And if you want some of my full transcriptions of my solos, every month I put up one, that's on the £5 a month tier, but trying to keep those prices super reasonable, hopefully. Anyway. So when I was, I think maybe like 10, 11 or something like that, I had someone come and stay at our house. So we lived on a farm. There was a B&B, and we used to have family friends sort of come and stay. And my babysitter's sister married a guy who had a studio. Now, this chap, I don't know how many sort of, or if it was even a particularly big studio at this point. I have no memory of that. I, like a little, guitar nerd, and he gave me some advice, because I was like, or my parents might have asked, like, what would he need to do if he wanted to be like a session player? And his advice was get comfortable playing in every single key. And I think he said you need to know your scales, and it was fairly simple advice, and I think was great advice, because it has led me to this scenario, and how I would do this essentially would be to find records that are in unusual keys. So if you listen to, I don't know, things by whoever, I'm trying to think right now. So Shut Up and Dance, for example, is in D flat major. And because I've done this sort of thing, I don't know how you guys feel playing in D flat major, but it's something where, for me, it feels totally like, I feel 100% comfortable there. Now, what I wouldn't necessarily be able to do so much, there's another key. So Pink Pony Club is in this key. So in my head, this is F sharp major, but it also exists as E flat minor, which is obviously crossing two different keys, right? Because, well, it's not, but in my head, because the key signature for an F sharp major would have sharps in it, the key signature for E flat minor would have flats in it, so it's a bit of a weird one there. But to actually play in this key, which Pink Pony Club is in, or Manhattan, feels totally natural to me because I've done it so much. And I guess what I like about this key is it's kind of between F, which I really liked as a key to play in, and G major to play in. And all of these keys feel slightly different. And I don't think it's just a case of thinking, oh, it's just G but down one fret, because that kind of leads you in a, I think maybe a little bit of a weird sort of, oh, I'm transposing all the time position. But so what I would really be trying to do when I was doing this would be to listen to where I am, in that kind of way, and move things through the scale. So absolutely what I think you should do, there probably exists something where you can find keys of different songs, and what I would maybe do is like maybe just be slightly meticulous with this and say, right, what can I play in C? I'm imagining for the majority of you probably can. Can you play in D major? I'm imagining for the majority of you probably D major feels quite familiar. If we go up a tone from there, E major. I'm going to guess all of you have played in E major before. Now, we go up a tone from there. I'm going to guess there's probably a big chunk of you that have never played in F sharp major, right? And can you improvise in it? And do you feel free playing in that key? If you go up one from there, we get to A flat major. Okay, and again, I guess that for some of you is going to feel quite unfamiliar. Then we get to B flat major. Now I'm imagining quite a lot of you will have played Purple Rain. Or I don't know, something else in If You're Not the One by Daniel Bedingfield. Some of you have probably played that, right? Hopefully. Okay, so that does the sort of non-in-between keys a little bit, right? So we've gone stepwise C, D, E, F sharp, A flat, B flat, back up again. And then there's just the other ones to do, right? So if you do the same sort of thing, but instead, I guess, we could start on, because what have we not done yet? We've not done like G, so if you started on G, you're all going to have played in G. Start in A. We've all learnt songs in A. What about B major? Maybe a little bit now less familiar. Okay, then D flat major, right? Because we go up one from that. E flat major, this is quite a nice one. Okay, one up from E flat majors to F. And then we're back to G. So it's not... that's covered it all, right? What I would do, if you've not done any of this before, is maybe pick like a key and a song a day. Find a song which is in a key that you're unfamiliar with and start experimenting with it and start playing the scales all over the neck. I think this is one of the sort of misconceptions that you need to learn a million different types of scale. I think really what every guitarist would benefit from knowing is the major scale everywhere on the neck. Now, as a kid, part of what led me to this situation was that I had the rock school grade 8 and it had G major written out, and they had it written out as modes. Now, I don't know whether modes is necessarily a relevant thing for most people, but what it did also do was cement this idea that you could play the major scale note of the major scale. And that became... Now, what I wanted to talk about next was about being potentially an unbalanced guitarist. So this is what potentially could happen if you don't try playing in lots of different keys. So, you know, where like, oh, you're like a really solid player in like some of the more typical blues keys. What happens if, I don't know, you get called to play, say, Michael Landau's got a version of Worried Life Blues which is in D flat. You know, have you ever played a blues in D flat, and you find that you're not necessarily able to improvise or play in that key or visualize or whatever, so you are like a bit of an unbalanced guitarist in that way. Similarly, I think one of the things that certainly as someone who's like predicated towards shred and that sort of stuff, there was definitely a time where that was sort of more of my focus. And you know, you've got to be careful to not, because you know, you meet some people like this sometimes, and people that have gone hard down the shred rabbit hole, and then they wake up, you know, in their 20s, and they then want to start playing music with other people, and it's like actually some of these skills have kind of not developed as much, and you end up being like this unbalanced guitarist. So it's important, I think, to early on focus on these things that are not so flashy, like being able to play in every key, or like being able to learn songs, like being able to transpose chord progressions. And one of the things at university, when I went to Bath Spa, which was a total waste of time, cheers Bath, except Stuart Ryan was there. So this was at a phase where I'd been going hard down the sort of shred route for years, and then was thrust into a situation. This was sort of like, I was a big fan of Guthrie on Larry Carlton and players like that. I knew I'd done grade 8 guitar, self-taught, but what I had not done, because I'd never had a guitar lesson, with fairly simple things like finding triads all over the neck. And these are things that, as I sort of grew older a bit, became more and more useful. So just the simple stuff. Can you find G all over the neck? This was one of the questions that Stuart asked me. There's an inversion. There's a second inversion. Okay, now here's another inversion. Sorry, that's root position, but on the A string. Okay, and then there's a second version. Okay. Okay, and these were things that I'd never really done before, and it took me, you know, time to actually figure out, well, what is this? Okay, and then you could do like a minor variation. And be aware of where the third, the fifth, and the root are as you're doing these things. Now that was something incredibly simple that I had basically entirely skipped out on, and it was really eye-opening. Now the next thing logically to do beyond that is, I think, take your triads through the major scale. Now what that means is we're going to diatonically move to each next note. So we go from G major to A minor to B minor to C major to D major to E minor, F sharp diminished. Keep going. And something that sounds very simple like this might be more difficult than you expect. The next thing beyond that is, I think, to start moving spread triads around. So, in this case, because that sounds a bit clunky, what we could do is put our third in the top. So we get root, fifth, third, minor, another minor, B minor, C major, and these are really useful building blocks. Now what you could also do is to start off with like an inversion. So say we're down here, just because we'll start on a G. So G, the third, would be of E, right? And we're now moving inversions through the scale. I think these kind of things are not flashy, but they're incredibly useful. So can you find your chords like that? And triads, I think, don't sleep on that. Now, the next thing I would say about being unbalanced is rhythm stuff is incredibly important, and I didn't realise this was another sort of big revelation for me. I was recording at a place. I was playing piano. Paddy Blight, who you might know from that pedal show, we were recording, and a couple of days later, kind of said we were listening to the stuff, and you were playing like ahead of the beat, like a lot of the time, and this is still a thing that I have a tendency towards, and it's important, I think, not to forget like rhythm stuff, because I think, you know, you get so bogged down with other bits and pieces that you might not realise, again, that you've become unbalanced in this way where like some of your rhythm playing, for me personally, is not as solid. So focus on that as a thing as well. So not only, you know, and this is, I think, really kind of about keeping it simple as well. So in this case, what I might do, just try to be conscious when you're doing stuff. So if I start a loop, so I think so if I've got my looper, stop and listen. So I've undone that now. So I'm now intentionally sort of playing a little bit later. could try and be intentional about like being lazy with this. Now that is obviously something which is not particularly locked in or tight, and does it groove? I guess is also the question. Try your different bits. Okay, and so I could do something, try and have like a different sort of feel. Is that a slightly tighter rhythmic feel, maybe? Now, I would also say, I don't necessarily hear things like some people have really precise stuff, so what I try to do is force myself to like play behind. To get the feel of what it would be like to sort of play after the beat. My natural inclination is to play ahead of the beat anyway, so I don't have to worry about that. But also then try and like land things strong on one. For me, those are some of the key building blocks that I've had to work on. I still try and continue to work on. So hopefully that's somewhat helpful. Don't try and, not beat yourself up over this stuff, but moving beyond being an unbalanced guitarist towards hopefully being like a little bit more musical across all the bits and pieces by not just working on shred stuff, but also considering these other bits and pieces. Hopefully that's somewhat helpful. Hopefully, I don't know. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and if you've got something like completely revelatory out of this, feel free to use the Buy Me a Coffee link. I'm sure it wasn't. It's the basics, right? I think. Anyway, catch you in another video soon. Cheers for stopping by.